Today I'm going to provide an overview of collecting items from one of my favorite companies back in the late 70s, early 80s. This is Judges Guild. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Today's video is sort of a collector's corner, where we're going to talk about how to build out a collection for items produced by Judges Guild, a really fantastic company that produced things for Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy role-playing games back in the mid to late 70s to the mid 80s. This first video is just going to be an introduction, and we'll follow it up with some other videos to provide some more specifics about different items you might want to collect. Hope you enjoy the video. I really love Judges Guild. I think it was a fantastic company, and so it's going to be a lot of fun to do a few videos to talk about the company and the products they produced. As I said, these videos are produced sort of with the collector in mind, so I'll try to tell you maybe how I built out my collection, what some of these different things are, why you might want them or might not, depending on what's in there and what you're looking for. So a quick history, and by the way, I did a video on Judges Guild. It was the second video I ever did. Until recently, it was the most popular video I'd ever done. I'll put a card for that up here so you guys can watch that if you want, if you haven't seen it yet. So Judges Guild was founded in 1976. It sort of ran its course and shut down around 1985. Bob Bledsaw, who was the driving force throughout that entire period, and then Bill Owen, those were the founders. Bill dropped out somewhere along the way, and in the history video I give a little more information about that. And Judges Guild was founded in Decatur, Illinois. They moved around a few times within town, but that's basically where they stayed. I'm going to cover a lot of things, but there's a couple of things Judges Guild related I won't cover. First off, the non-Dungeons and Dragons or non-fantasy products they put out. They did some sci-fi stuff, some heroes, villains and vigilantes, RuneQuest, Tunnels and Trolls, Empire of the Petal Throne, Chivalry and Sorcery, and Dragon Quest. They also did some later releases, like in the 90s. The company came back, worked with different other publishers and put out their products, sometimes repackaged them, sometimes there was new material, but I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff today. So what did they do? I break their stuff down into a few categories. We'll talk a little bit later about the different ways they put out lists of products. They sort of did the same thing. There's just some universal supplements or products, including adventures, that they did. They did things specifically and under license for Dungeons and Dragons, and that would have been, depending on what you were playing, either what we call original D&D, like the wood grain box or the white box, or maybe even Holmes Basic. And they had general supplements and they had adventures. And then they got a license to do Advanced Dungeons and Dragons when that was produced. And again, general supplements and adventures. And then they also had a number of periodicals. They put out sort of the Judges Guild Journal. Eventually they overtook a product called The Dungeoneer, which was done by Janelle Jaquays, started it, and then it got sold, and then sold a second time to Judges Guild, and they produced the Dungeoneer. And then they put out a successor publication they called Pegasus. So we'll talk a little bit about those today, and then, like I said, I'll do some follow-on videos to take a closer look at all these products. I'll get out of the way. Here's the whole sort of kit and caboodle of all the different things that I'm going to talk about. That Universal, Dungeons and Dragons, you can see, AD&D, that didn't last quite as long, and then all these periodicals, which were, the journal starts at the very beginning in 76 and runs all the way off the page at the bottom for Pegasus. And here, just take a closer look. So here on the Universal list, some of these things are universal, or more like supplements, and some of them are adventures. They're all sort of mixed together. You'll see on the left-hand side these numbers, and they gave things product numbers, and then obviously they had a name, and then I've got a year when they were when it was first published. And also some of these things have multiple publications. Sometimes the cover changes completely. Sometimes there's just slight changes to the covers you can use to tell the different printings that were made. Sometimes that affects value a little bit, but mostly I think condition is the most important thing. Then they did licensed products from Dungeons and Dragons. And here's that complete list. And again, the sort of, which seems to all the rest of us a very odd numbering system. It was more or less sequential if you didn't try to put these things into categories. The first thing they did was item number 1, 2, 3, etc. Then they have their advanced D&D line of products. The character codex at the top is a sort of, I guess you'd say, a supplemental product. Everything else on here is an adventure for AD&D. And then they have their, I'll call them publications or periodicals. The journal, as you can see there, starts in 1976 with, it's sometimes called Journal Zero, and it has these letters next to it, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. And then the Dungeoneer, again, the original 6 of those were done by Jaquays. They did a reprint in a sort of anthology, which is called the Compendium, which is they produced. And then a couple of issues there were produced by the person who bought it from Jaquays, and then they picked it up and took it all the rest of the way forward. And then you'll see in 1980 they combined it. So there was an issue that was Journal number 22 and Dungeoneer number 19. And then they have the Dungeoneer Journal, which is what they produce going forward after that. And then when that stops at Journal number 25, they start with the Pegasus, which is another periodical that they put out. Another thing that collectors are really into with Judges Guild is the catalogs. And here are just a few of those that start in the 70s and early 80s. And as I said, those things sometimes go for more money than the actual products, which is kind of interesting. So we talked about the numbering system. So they call it different things. They called it a booty list at first. So here's the booty list. And you'll see the numbered, and here they are, right, in order. So the very first thing they produced, and it's in my history video, was this city-state map, this town. And they first sold it up at Gen Con out of the back of Bill Owen's car. And then they came back and they sold enough to make him think, you know what, this maybe is worthwhile doing. They came up with this idea, and the whole idea with Judges Guild, right, was to make items for referees, right? So whether it was charts that were basically taken out of the rule books, or a setting like the city-state, or other adventures, or other things you could use as a DM, they had the vision and saw that that was something people would pay for. And their idea was a subscription service. And so you would get a little packet, and you'd pay a subscription, and every month you'd get a little packet of whatever the guys had come up with. Between last month and this month, get published, and they would send you that packet. And we'll talk about those in future videos, specifically what you would get in each of those packets. But Bill Owen came up with this idea. The first one was called Packet I for initial, but he didn't use the word. It wasn't called your initial packet. It was called Packet I, or Group I. And then, rather than number them or pick some other way of identifying it, they just started using the letters. So the second month they sent something out, it was Packet J, K, L, M, and they did that for a little while, and then they finally gave that up and just went to a journal that was lettered and then numbered, right? But so then they had these things called tack cards, some more guideline booklets, other charts, dungeon maps, and more maps of the city-states, because they would sometimes have these big maps for the dungeon master, or they called the referee, and then smaller maps with less information maybe on them you could give to players. And that was the main thing, was the campaign setting around the city-state of the Invincible Overlord, as it was labeled by Bob Bledsoe. So anyway, so they had the booty list here, and it's in order. And then you quickly see here some other things. They have a treasure vault, and now you can see on the left hand side, the numbering goes 1, 2, 14, 27, 28, 36, 37, 46, 47. So stuff is missing in there. And that's because some of the numbers were assigned to the journal, some to the Dungeoneer. It didn't really seem to have any rhyme or reason. And that's why I had those charts initially. You can sort of freeze it and see the numbers that went with the different things. It does tell you the chronological order in which they were created, if you want to go back and sort it by, sort it in that way. And then now we're calling it the treasure vault. And here's another treasure vault a little later. And this is one of the things that you do to identify the sort of timing and the publication date, because when they would update a product, they would often update their booty list or their treasure vault or their list of items. And so like the first printing, the highest number might be 150, and the next time you look it might be 220, and now you know, okay, that was a different public printing. and where it comes chronologically later when it was produced based on how high the numbers go. So one of the things I mentioned that they put out were these, the journals. So here's I for initial, J and K that they put out. I'll get myself out of the way, let you guys see this stuff a little cleaner. And then they, here are the later ones. This is like L and M that went to more of a paper, like a normal piece of paper size. Those initial ones were like 8.5, or were like legal sized. Now we're about down to a letter sized piece of paper. Then they switched to the journal being something that looked essentially like a newspaper, and it was printed on like newspaper paper. And so one of the issues they've had throughout was that the quality of what they were printing was not printing on was not all that great, and so stuff did not hold up all that well. And these newspaper-like journals are certainly something that didn't hold up that well over time, but they are kind of cool and had some neat art and some neat information. Then also with like this is showing you I, J, K, L, and M. They would put out these little booklets that have information. The first one had like random encounters. They talk about morale, armor. The orange one there, that's the fourth one from the left, has information about an adventure setting called Teagle Manor. And then this last one for M has information about things in the water because it came out with an adventure called Modron, at least that's how I pronounce it, which was an island or water-based adventure. So that's it for my brief introduction to Judges Guild and how we approach the collecting. As I mentioned, the way I break it down is the universal stuff, supplements and adventures, the D&D stuff, supplements and adventures, and the AD&D stuff. It would be supplements and adventures, but essentially it's all adventures for them. And then the periodicals. We look at the journals and the Dungeoneer and then the Pegasus, sort of as separate things. I think the next few I'll do will focus on those initial combined mailings. So what did you get with installment I, J, K, L, M? And I'll show you all the different things you should have in there and talk a little bit about them. And then we'll move on to some videos where we look at the different products, and I'll explain to you what exactly is in there, what makes it a complete set. So if you're collecting, oh, this is supposed to have a map or it's just a booklet, etc. And then we'll go on to talk about some other things within there. A lot of great products put out by Judges Guild. Really looking forward to doing this series of videos. It'll probably take me quite a while to get through all the material that we can cover just with Judges Guild. Hope you guys enjoyed this quick video, and I hope you're looking forward to the series as much as I'm looking forward to doing it. If you're subscribed, I appreciate that, and if you have friends who might be interested in subscribing, please send them our way. I hope they'll be subscribers as well. Have a great rest of your day, great rest of the week, and until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.